God, this is a big freaking alligator. Check this guy out. Do you think this guy is big? Look at this guy. Welcome to another episode of Bassin with Captain Lou. No, this is not a peacock bass fishing video. This video is about leaders. That's right, leaders. Love them, hate them, stick around, and I'll talk to you about them. So over the course of this video, there is no order to it, meaning I'm taking you guys along fishing with me. I'm gonna be touching on several points in regards to leaders, but there is no specific order to it. There is one though, the last one. The last point I'm gonna cover at the end of the video. So yes, that means you guys have to stay for the whole video. I heard some of you moan, but that's okay. You guys have to stay till the end of the video for my last and best point on why I tie leaders. So when it comes to leaders, there's different lengths. And what I do is I tie my wingspan. So I'm about almost 6 feet. So I open my arms as wide as I possibly can. And that's the length of my leader. I use the FG knot to join, but that's enough about knots. So when it comes to lengths, the reason why I use such a long leader is because of the type of knot that I use. And let me explain. The FG knot, for example, this is not an FG knot video, but the FG knot is a very small profile knot. It's a very slender, small profile. So it doesn't knock through the guides as much as some of your other well-known adjoining knots. So if you find that your leader knot is knocking through your guides as you're fishing, I consider that a red flag. And the reason for that is because that knot is hitting those guides at a very high rate of speed, cast after cast after cast. And what's happening is you're wearing down that knot. You're slowly chipping away and making that knot weaker because of that friction and the knocking of the guides. Ultimately, what ends up happening is, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but I know in the past I did, when you go do a cast sometimes and all of a sudden you see your lure flying off into the distance and you're wondering what happened. Well, what happened was you wore out that knot at the junction and the knot failed. So the reason why, like I said, I chose the FG knot is because the FG knot has a very small, slender profile and it minimizes the contact that it has on the guides. So if you find that the FG knot is a little bit too challenging or it's not the knot for you, that's okay. And you have your go-to joining knot for a leader, then what I recommend for you guys is that you use a shorter leader. And why is that? Because it minimizes the contact on the guide. So a question that I get asked a lot is, how heavy of a leader do I use? And usually I use anywhere between 12 to 15 for my finesse applications and finesse light applications. And I use up to 20 pounds for my medium to heavier applications. And I'll go into that in a little bit. So the reason why I use a lighter leader on some of my applications is because the weight of your leader could affect the action of your lure. So for example, if you're using a small lure like this and you use a heavy leader, let's say a 20-pound leader, let's say a 20-pound mono, you're going to affect the action of the lure, of this little lure, because of the weight and drag of that leader. Versus if you use a lighter leader, anything under 15, I go anywhere between 12 to 15. I don't go less than that. Some people go 10, some people go even less, and that's okay. That's their thing. The lure is gonna move a little bit more freer and impart more action. Now you're gonna be asking, what kind of techniques do I use for a heavier leader, like the 20-pound? I use the 20-pound leader when I'm using heavier bait casters, not like this one, this is a finesse one, but a heavier bait caster and a heavier application, like very big prop baits, very big walking style baits. That's when I will use a 20-pound leader. And the reason for it is because I find that with braid and those bigger baits, and sometimes these smaller baits, when you begin working the lure, the braid gets caught up in the hooks, or sometimes gets caught up in the props a lot, when it makes it annoying. I'm not saying it doesn't happen with mono, but it happens in less occurrence. There he is. These guys are so much fun, aren't they? But here's the reason why I use leaders for these guys. I use leaders a lot because of the abrasion resistance, really. Especially when fishing in the Everglades. I know you guys have seen in the videos how I battle an Oscar or a nice peacock or a bass for that matter. And the main thing, or the main area they're running to, is gonna go right into the vegetation or right into the structure, and they want to get that bait out of their mouth, or that lure out of their mouth. So what happens is they rake themselves against all that type of vegetation, and sometimes they get pinned in there pretty well. And if I'm using a light braid, more than likely they're gonna break me off, especially around rocks and trees and all that stuff. They will break me off with that braid if I don't fight them properly. However, with a leader, it gives me a little bit more of a margin to be able to fight them a little bit more effectively, because the mono gives me a little bit more abrasion resistance than what the braid may be offering me. Another question I get asked is about the visibility factors. Like, are you throwing leaders because of the visibility factor? Meaning you're throwing like fluorocarbon type leaders and stuff like that, so you could give your lure less of a presence and the bass won't see the line? And the answer to that is yes, but depends on the location. Now, although visibility for me is a factor, but it's not my main reason on why I throw leaders. The reason why I throw leaders is because I like to have the best of both worlds, meaning I love all my rods except one has braid, but I do use different types of leader based on the technique. And I find that mono has its advantages, as does braid, so I put the two together and I have the best of both worlds. So there's 3 different types of leader material. You got monofilament, which I've discussed, fluorocarbon, and you also have copoly. I mainly use monofilament for my top water applications. Anything that requires top water, poppers, prop baits, top water jerk baits, all that stuff that requires them to be sitting on top of the water, I use mono. In the event that I'm fishing below the water line, like in the middle or the bottom, or I'm doing T-rigs or stuff like that, I will use a fluorocarbon or a copoly. Reason for it is because copoly and fluorocarbon sinks, and it does change the characteristics of the lure with the sinking. So that's why with mono, it stays on top nice and easy, and you're able to impart a lot of action with your top water lures. The best advice that I could provide you guys if you're thinking about leaders is to experiment. I know what works for me, but just because I say this range and this range and this and that, doesn't necessarily mean I'm right. It's just what's worked for me throughout the years. You guys can find combinations that may work better for you, but the main thing is to experiment. Leaders do have their place, and if you find that right niche for you, it's just gonna make your fishing experience that much more enjoyable. Catching peacocks doesn't get old. I know those were small, but it is what it is. But nonetheless, I appreciate you guys still staying till the end of this video. A deal's a deal. Here's my #1 reason of why I tie leaders. And the #1 reason, and I covered this earlier, is most of my reels are spooled with braid. Braid will stay on these reels of mine for a very, very long time, unless I have a catastrophic event and I have to re-spool. But other than that, this will stay on here for a very long time. So the only thing I gotta change is the leader itself. And it's gonna and that I change every outing anyways. So in the long run, I'm gonna save myself some money. Hopefully you guys got something out of the video. Like the video, share the video, better yet, subscribe. Just become part of this community. If you have any questions or anything like that, just go ahead and comment below. You guys wanna learn more about custom rods and the do's and don'ts in regards to them, go ahead and check out that video right here. You guys wanna learn about peacock bass fishing and how fun it can be, check out that video right there. It's pretty cool. So nonetheless, I appreciate you guys for watching. I'll see you guys again soon.